Never reveal everything. Secrets strengthen desire. You want to know why people lose interest? They gave everything away too fast. Not physically, mentally, emotionally. They showed all their cards, answered every question, explained every thought, revealed every layer before anyone even asked. And in doing so, they killed the one thing that keeps people engaged: curiosity. Mystery isn't deception, it's strategy. The person who reveals everything has nothing left to discover. They become predictable, comfortable, easy to understand. And the moment you're fully understood, you're often overlooked. Because human nature doesn't desire what it fully possesses. It desires what remains just out of reach. The disciplined understand this. They don't spill their entire story in the first conversation. They don't overshare to fill silence. They don't perform their depth for strangers. They reveal in layers, slowly, selectively, strategically. And in that restraint, they become unforgettable. If you're tired of being taken for granted, if you're ready to understand why the quiet ones command rooms, then stay. Because what you're about to learn isn't about manipulation. It's about mastery. We live in an age of oversharing. People broadcast their breakfast, their feelings, their every thought before it's even fully formed. They treat their lives like open books, assuming that transparency equals authenticity. But here's what they miss. There's a difference between being genuine and being exposed. Authenticity doesn't require you to reveal everything. It requires you to reveal what matters to the people who've earned it at the time it serves both of you. Everything else, that's noise. And noise dilutes power. The ancient Stoics understood this instinctively. They practiced discretion not as dishonesty, but as wisdom. They knew that words, once spoken, can't be retrieved. That vulnerability, when offered too freely, loses its impact. That the sacred becomes profane when exposed to everything and everyone. Marcus Aurelius, in his private meditations, wrote, "Because a thing seems difficult for you, do not think it impossible for anyone to accomplish." But notice, he wrote this privately, for himself. These weren't public declarations. These were internal truths, held close, revealed only after his death. Even his wisdom was protected, guarded, reserved. That's the pattern of powerful people throughout history. They don't perform their complexity for audiences. They don't explain themselves to everyone who asks. They understand something fundamental about human psychology. People value what they have to work for. When you make yourself easy to read, easy to predict, easy to fully understand, you remove the element that makes relationships, any relationships, compelling. You remove mystery, and without mystery there's no magnetism. This isn't about playing games. It's about recognizing that your story, your depth, your inner world, these are valuable. And valuable things aren't given away freely. They're protected, shared selectively, revealed to those who've demonstrated they can hold them with care. Most people get this backward. They think openness creates connection, but indiscriminate openness creates familiarity, and familiarity without foundation breeds contempt. Or worse, indifference. The disciplined do it differently. They build intrigue through restraint. They create depth by not displaying everything. They command attention by understanding that what's concealed often speaks louder than what's revealed. Let's explore how. 1. The law of scarcity. Economics has a simple principle that most people ignore in their personal lives. Scarcity creates value. When something is abundant, readily available, easily accessed, its perceived worth drops. But when something is rare, protected, hard to obtain, people want it more. Not because it's objectively better, but because scarcity triggers desire. Your presence works the same way. When you're always available, always texting back immediately, always saying yes, always making yourself accessible, you become common, expected, taken for granted, not because you're not valuable, but because you've made yourself too available to be valued. Think about the people who command the most respect in your life. chances are they're not the ones who overshare. They're not the ones who explain themselves constantly. They're not performing their inner world for anyone who glances their way. They're selective, measured, present when they're present, but absent when they choose to be. That absence isn't rejection, it's preservation. The Stoics called this reserving yourself. Seneca wrote extensively about the importance of solitude, of protecting your time and your thoughts from the constant demands of others. Not because you hate people, but because you recognize that your inner life is finite, your energy is limited, and not everyone deserves access. When you start treating your time, your words, your presence as scarce resources, things shift. People stop taking you for granted because you're no longer guaranteed. They pay attention when you speak because you don't speak constantly. They value your company because it's not always available. They think about you when you're gone because you've left space for curiosity to grow. This isn't about being unavailable to punish people or create artificial scarcity. It's about genuine boundaries. It's about recognizing that you don't owe everyone your constant presence, that it's okay to disappear, to be quiet, to hold back. Most people are terrified of this. They think if they're not constantly visible, constantly engaging, constantly available, they'll be forgotten. But the opposite is true. When you're always there, you fade into the background, you become wallpaper. But when you appear and disappear strategically, when you show up fully but don't overstay, you become memorable. There's a reason why the most fascinating people are often the hardest to pin down, not because they're playing games, but because they've cultivated lives rich enough that they don't need constant external validation. They have interests, projects, inner worlds that don't require an audience. And when they do engage, they bring something worth paying attention to, because they've been somewhere, thought about something, built something in the silence. That's the difference. Most people use other people as mirrors, constantly checking in, constantly seeking reflection, constantly needing validation that they exist and matter. But the disciplined use solitude as a forge. They retreat not to hide, but to sharpen. And when they return, they bring an edge that demands respect. Scarcity isn't about withholding love or care from people who deserve it. It's about withholding your full self from people who haven't earned it yet. It's about making them curious, making them wonder, making them realize that access to you is a privilege, not a right. And once they understand that, once they realize you're not desperate for their attention, not performing for their approval, not giving everything away for free, everything changes. They lean in, they pay attention, they respect the boundaries you've set because those boundaries signal something they rarely encounter: self-respect. You're not for everyone. Your depth isn't public property. Your story isn't entertainment. And the people who truly value you will understand that. They'll appreciate that you're selective, that you have layers they haven't seen yet, that there's more to discover, and that anticipation, that sense that there's always something more beneath the surface, is what keeps desire alive. 2. The power of selective revelation. Here's what most people don't understand about vulnerability. Timing is everything. Vulnerability shared too early is just oversharing. It creates discomfort, not connection, because vulnerability requires context. It requires trust. It requires the other person to have demonstrated they can hold what you're offering. But most people don't wait. They meet someone, and within an hour they've unloaded their trauma, their insecurities, their entire backstory. And they wonder why. It pushes people away. Because they skipped the foundation. They revealed the ending before the other person invested in the story. Strategic revelation means understanding that depth is earned, not given. You don't owe anyone your full truth just because they asked. You don't have to explain yourself to prove you're authentic. Real authenticity is knowing what to share, when, and with whom. Epictetus taught his students to be cautious with their words. First, learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. That advice applies here. Before you reveal something about yourself, ask, what purpose does this serve? Does this person need to know this? Have they shown they can hold it responsibly? If the answer is no, hold it. This isn't about being dishonest. It's about being discerning. There's a difference between lying and simply not telling everything. You can be truthful without being transparent. You can be genuine without being exposed. Think about art. A painting doesn't show you everything at once. It reveals itself in layers. First the composition, then the details, then the subtleties you only notice after looking for a while. The best art rewards sustained attention. It doesn't scream its meaning at you. It invites you to discover. You should operate the same way. Let people discover you slowly. Let each conversation reveal something new, something they didn't know before. Let them earn your depth through consistent presence, through demonstrated care, through time. And here's the paradox. The more selective you are with what you reveal, the more powerful those revelations become. When you've been reserved, when you've been strategic, when you've held most of yourself back, and then you choose to share something real, something true, something vulnerable, it lands differently. It matters more because the scarcity of your openness makes each instance of it valuable. Compare that to the person who tells everyone everything. When they finally share something meaningful, it gets lost in the noise because they've trained people to expect constant disclosure. There's no contrast, no weight, no significance. But when you've been quiet, when you've been measured, and then you open up, people lean in, they remember, they treasure it because they know it's rare. This is why the strongest relationships aren't built on immediate transparency. They're built on gradual trust, on slow revelation, on the understanding that some things are only shared when both people are ready. You control the pace. You decide what to reveal and when. And that control isn't manipulation. It's self-respect. It's recognizing that your story has value. Your experiences have weight. And not everyone deserves immediate access to them. Seneca wrote, "If you live according to nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to opinion, you will never be rich." Living according to nature means understanding that some things should remain hidden until the right moment, that seeds don't grow when immediately exposed to everything. They need darkness first, protection, time. Your depth is the same. It needs protection. It needs the right conditions. It needs people who've proven they won't mishandle it. So be selective, be strategic, be intentional about what you reveal and to whom, not because you're hiding, but because you're honoring the weight of what you carry. And watch what happens. Watch how people become more curious, more invested, more careful with you, because they sense that access to your inner world isn't automatic, it's earned, and that makes it priceless. Part 3. The magnetism of mystery. There's a reason why the most captivating people are often the hardest to fully know. They don't answer every question. They don't explain every choice. They don't perform their reasoning for audiences. And in that restraint, they create a gravitational pull that most people can't manufacture through all their talking. Mystery isn't about being cryptic for the sake of it. It's about understanding that the human mind is wired to solve puzzles, to fill gaps, to seek completion. And when you leave space, when you don't answer everything, explain everything, reveal everything, you activate that mechanism. People start thinking about you when you're not there, wondering about you, trying to figure you out. That's power, quiet, effortless power. Most people kill this immediately. They over-explain their decisions because they need everyone to understand. They justify their choices because they fear judgment. They spell out their reasoning because they're desperate to be validated as logical, reasonable, acceptable. But here's the truth. You don't need everyone to understand you, and your need to be understood is making you forgettable. The person who says, "I have my reasons," and leaves it at that, more compelling than the person who explains for 15 minutes, because they've left space for imagination, for curiosity, for the other person to fill in the blanks. And here's what's interesting. People will usually assume better about you than worse. If you're calm, if you're confident, if you're not defensive about your privacy, when someone asks, "Why did you do that?" and you smile and say, "Felt right," you've just done something most people can't. You've refused to justify yourself. You've demonstrated that you don't need their approval. And that confidence, that self-possession, becomes magnetic. Carl Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The people who get frustrated by your mystery, they're revealing their own need to control, to categorize, to fully understand everyone around them. That's their discomfort, not your problem. Let them be confused. Let them wonder. Let them realize that you're not a book they can finish in one sitting. You're a library, and they've only seen the entrance. This applies to everything: your past, your plans, your thoughts, your feelings. Not everything needs to be broadcast. Not everything needs to be explained. When someone asks what you did this weekend and you say, "Caught up on some things," instead of detailing every hour, you've maintained mystery. When they ask what you're working on and you say, "A few projects," instead of listing everything, you've protected your energy and maintained intrigue. Small things, but they compound, because over time people learn that you're not an open book, that access to your inner world is selective, that they can't just ask any question and expect a full answer. And that selectivity makes them more careful, more curious, more respectful. The mystery you create isn't about being difficult. It's about having boundaries. It's about recognizing that some things are yours alone, that you don't owe anyone a guided tour of your psyche, that privacy is a form of power in an age where everyone's giving themselves away for free. And the people who respect that, those are your people, the ones who understand that depth takes time to reveal. That trust is built slowly, that some questions aren't answered in the first conversation or the 10th, or maybe ever. Those relationships built on gradual discovery rather than immediate exposure are the ones that last. Because there's always more to learn, always another layer, always something that keeps it interesting. Most people front-load everything. They give their best material in the first interaction, and then they wonder why things fizzle out, why the initial excitement fades, why people lose interest. Because there was nothing left to discover. But when you pace yourself, when you reveal in chapters, not paragraphs, you create longevity, sustained interest, the sense that knowing you is a journey, not a transaction. That's the magnetism of mystery. It's not about being fake or withholding love. It's about understanding that your depth is vast, and not everyone needs to see all of it immediately, or ever. You decide what to show. You decide what stays hidden. And in that decision, you reclaim something most people have given away: control over your own narrative. 4. Silence as strength. Most people are terrified of silence. They fill every gap with words, every pause with explanation, every quiet moment with noise, because silence feels like emptiness, and they've been taught that emptiness is weakness. But the disciplined know better. Silence isn't absence, it's presence distilled. When you can sit in silence, with yourself, with others, in situations that demand a response, you demonstrate something rare: self-control. The ability to not react, to not fill space just because it's there, to be comfortable with the weight of words unspoken. And that silence, it unsettles people. Because most people use words as a shield. They talk to avoid thinking. They explain to avoid being misunderstood. They fill silence because they're uncomfortable with what might emerge in the quiet. But you're different. You understand that not every thought needs to be voiced. Not every question requires an immediate answer. Not every silence needs to be broken. The Stoics practiced this religiously. Epictetus taught, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But it goes deeper than that. It's not just about listening more. It's about understanding that silence often communicates more than words ever could. When someone challenges you and you simply look at them, calm, saying nothing. You've just won. Not because you had the better argument, but because you didn't need one. Your silence said, I don't need to defend myself to you. When someone gossips and you don't engage, don't feed it, just let it float past you. You've created distance. You've shown that you're not interested in small talk, small minds, small energy. When someone asks an invasive question and you pause, hold their gaze, and calmly say, I'd rather not get into that, you've set a boundary that no amount of explanation could set more clearly. Silence is efficient. It's clean. It's powerful. And in a world where everyone's racing to speak, to be heard, to have the last word, the person who can be quiet becomes the most interesting person in the room, because people will wonder, what are they thinking? Why aren't they jumping in? What do they know that I don't? Your silence makes them curious, makes them lean in, makes them realize that when you do speak, they should listen, because you don't waste words. Think about the most respected people you know. They're rarely the loudest. They're not dominating conversations. They're not explaining themselves constantly. They speak when they have something worth saying, and when they don't, they're quiet. That selectivity makes their words carry weight. Compare that to the person who never stops talking, who has an opinion on everything, who needs to be part of every conversation. Over time, people stop listening because they know nothing important is coming. It's just noise, just someone uncomfortable with silence trying to fill it with anything. But you've trained yourself differently. You've learned that silence is a tool, a filter, a way to protect your energy and command respect simultaneously. When you're silent, you're not absent. You're observing. You're thinking. You're deciding if this moment deserves your words, and most moments don't. Seneca wrote, silence is a lesson learned from the many sufferings of life. He understood that suffering teaches you to be selective, to guard your words, to recognize that most arguments aren't worth having. Most explanations won't change minds. Most words won't be remembered, so why waste them? Instead, be strategic. Speak when it matters, when your words can build, clarify, or protect something worth protecting. And the rest of the time, be still. Let others fill the silence. Let them reveal themselves in their discomfort with quiet. Let them talk themselves in circles while you remain centered, calm, observing. And watch what happens. Watch how they start to respect you more, how they become more careful around you, how they realize that you're not someone who can be drawn into petty arguments or meaningless debates, because you've mastered something they haven't. The strength to be silent when silence serves you better than speech. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And in a noisy world, it's revolutionary. 5. Protecting your vision. Here's a truth most people learn too late. The moment you share your vision with the wrong people, you invite doubt, dilution, and distraction. Not because those people are malicious, but because they can't see what you see. They don't feel what you feel. And their well-meaning skepticism can plant seeds of uncertainty that weren't there before. Your vision, your goals, your plans, your dreams, these are fragile in the early stages. They need protection. They need time to solidify before they're exposed to outside opinion. And most people skip this step. They announce their intentions before they've even begun. They share their plans before they've taken the first step. And then they wonder why their momentum dies. Because every person they told became a weight. Are you still doing that thing? How's that project going? I thought you were going to. Each question, each check-in, each reminder that people are watching, waiting, judging, it drains the energy that should be going into the work. The disciplined do it differently. They build in silence. They move quietly. They don't announce. They execute. And when the results speak for themselves, they let those do the talking. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private notes, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Not talk about being one. Not announce your intention to be one. Just be one. and let your actions reveal it over time. This is strategic concealment at its finest. You protect your vision by not exposing it prematurely. You protect your motivation by not letting others siphon it through doubt disguised as concern. You protect your progress by not subjecting it to constant external evaluation. Because here's what happens when you share too early. People will project their limitations onto your vision. They'll tell you it's too risky because they're risk-averse. They'll say it's impractical because they lack imagination. They'll question your capability because they're measuring you against their own ceiling, not your potential. And if you're not careful, you'll internalize that. You'll start to see your vision through their lens. And slowly, subtly, you'll lower your aim to match their expectations. That's the danger of premature revelation. It doesn't just invite doubt, it invites you to shrink. But when you keep it close, when you work in silence and let the results emerge naturally, you bypass all of that. You don't have to defend your vision because you're not asking for permission. You don't have to explain your process because you're not seeking validation. You just work, build, execute. And when people finally see what you've created, when they witness the result rather than the messy middle, they respect it more because it's undeniable, it's real, it's not a plan or a promise, it's proof. There's a reason why the most impactful people often seem to appear out of nowhere. They didn't appear, they were building all along, just quietly, away from the spotlight, away from the commentary, away from the noise. Nietzsche said, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Your tribe, your friends, your family, your social circle, they mean well. But they're often the biggest threat to your growth. Not through malice, but through proximity. Their comfort with who you are can become resistance to who you're becoming. So protect your vision, guard your plans. Be selective about who you let into the workshop. Because not everyone deserves to see the work in progress. Some people only deserve to see the finished product. And when you operate this way, when you build first and reveal later, you create a pattern of credibility. People learn that when you say you're going to do something, you don't just talk about it. You do it quietly, consistently, without fanfare. That builds trust. That builds respect. That makes your word mean something because you've trained people to know. When this person shares something, it's already in motion. It's not a daydream. It's not a maybe. It's happening. And that reputation of being someone who executes rather than announces is worth more than any premature validation you might have gotten by sharing too soon. 6. The art of strategic evasion. Not every question deserves an answer. Read that again. Because most people operate as if every question asked is a question they're obligated to answer. Someone asks about your plans, your income, your relationships, your past, and they immediately start explaining, justifying, revealing. But here's the truth. Invasive questions don't require honest answers. They require boundaries. Strategic evasion isn't lying. It's redirecting. It's deflecting. It's choosing not to engage with curiosity that doesn't serve you. And it's a skill that separates the people who protect their power from the people who give it away through TMI. When someone asks a question you don't want to answer, you have options. The vague truth. Things are good. I'm figuring it out. It's a process. The gentle redirect. Why do you ask? Puts the burden back on them. The light deflection. Long story. What about you? How's their thing? The firm boundary. I'd rather keep that private. No justification needed. Each of these protects you without creating unnecessary conflict. You're not being rude. You're just not complying with the assumption that you owe them an answer. And here's what happens when you start doing this consistently. People stop asking invasive questions. Because they learn you're not going to satisfy their curiosity. They learn there are parts of you that aren't up for discussion, and they respect that, even if they don't like it. The Stoics understood this deeply. They distinguished between what's in your control and what's not. Someone's curiosity, not your problem. Their comfort with your answers, not your responsibility. Your only job is to protect your peace and your privacy. Epictetus taught, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. The same applies here. Don't explain why you're private, just be private. Your boundaries don't need justification, they just need consistency. And yes, some people will call you guarded, closed off, secretive. Let them, because what they're really saying is, I can't access you as easily as I'd like, and that frustrates me. Good. That frustration is proof your boundaries are working. Because here's the thing, the people who truly matter in your life won't push for information you're not ready to give. They'll respect your pace, your privacy, your right to reveal yourself on your own terms. The people who push, who pry, who make you feel guilty for not opening up, those are the people you need to keep at a distance, because they don't respect your autonomy. They see you as entertainment, as gossip material, as someone they're entitled to fully know, and you're not obligated to satisfy that entitlement. Strategic evasion protects you from energy vampires, from people who ask questions not because they care, but because they're nosy, from conversations that would drain you without giving anything back. And it protects something even more important, your sense of self. Because every time you reveal something you didn't want to, every time you answer a question that made you uncomfortable, every time you comply with invasive curiosity, you're training yourself to prioritize other people's comfort over your own boundaries. And that pattern, repeated over time, erodes your self-respect. But when you practice strategic evasion, when you calmly, consistently protect your privacy, you're reinforcing a different pattern. You're teaching yourself that your boundaries matter, that your comfort matters, that you don't owe anyone access to your inner world just because they're curious. That's self-respect in action, and people feel it. They might not like it, but they respect it. Because deep down, everyone recognizes strength when they see it. And boundary setting is one of the clearest displays of strength. So what happens when you put all of this together? When you treat your presence as scarce, your revelations as strategic, your mystery as magnetic, when you master silence, protect your vision, and practice strategic evasion, when you understand that secrets don't weaken desire, they strengthen it, you become someone people can't quite figure out. And in an age where everyone's an open book, that makes you rare. You're not performing your depth for validation. You're not oversharing to create false intimacy. You're not explaining yourself to people who haven't earned the explanation. You're just present, selective, intentional, and that creates a gravitational pull most people spend their lives trying to manufacture through performance. But you're not performing. You're protecting. Protecting your energy, your story, your vision, your peace. And in that protection, you've created something magnetic, a life that's yours, truly yours. Not a highlight reel for strangers, not a story shaped by other people's expectations, just yours. And people sense that. They sense that you're not desperate for their attention, not seeking their approval, not hoping they'll understand you. You're fine if they do, fine if they don't, because you're anchored to something internal, not external. That's freedom, and it shows up in everything you do, in the way you don't rush to fill silence, in the way you don't overshare to strangers, in the way you build in the shadows and let results do the talking, in the way you set boundaries without guilt, in the way you reveal yourself slowly to people who've proven they can hold what you're offering. This isn't about being cold or closed off, it's about being selective, strategic, intentional about who gets access and how much, because your depth is valuable. Your time is limited. Your energy is sacred, and not everyone deserves equal portions. The people who do, they'll appreciate the rarity. They'll value what you choose to share because they know it's not given freely. They'll respect your boundaries because those boundaries signal self-respect. And the people who don't, they'll drift away, and that's perfect because they were never meant to know you anyway. This week, practice restraint. When someone asks a question you don't want to answer, don't. When you're tempted to overshare, pause. When you feel the urge to explain yourself, resist. Start building the habit of protection, not through walls, but through selectivity, not through coldness, but through boundaries. Let people wonder about you. Let them be curious. Let them realize that knowing you is a privilege, not a given. And watch what happens. Watch how the right people lean in while the wrong ones fall away. Watch how your words carry more weight because you use fewer of them. Watch how your presence becomes more magnetic because you're no longer everywhere all at once. Mystery isn't manipulation, it's mastery. Mastery over your narrative, mastery over your energy, mastery over who gets to know the real you. Stay focused, stay guarded, and remember, the quiet work you do in private is shaping the power they'll never fully understand.